Hello again. An undesirable byproduct of the promotion of Mary Seacole as a West Indian equivalent of Florence Nightingale is that Nightingale's real achievements have been lost to sight, and a generation is growing up who have no idea at all what it was that Florence Nightingale actually did. For well over a century, Florence Nightingale was held in very great esteem in this country, partly for her organisation of nursing during the Crimean War in the 1850s when this country invaded Ukraine, but more especially for her fantastic contributions to mathematics, the effects of which are still very much with us. Ever do pie charts at school? Well, it was Florence Nightingale who popularised them as a way of displaying information, of which more later. In the 1980s, when Black History Month began to be celebrated in Britain, somebody came up with the idea of digging up the long-forgotten figure of a Jamaican woman called Mary Seacole, who ran a restaurant for officers during the Crimean War. From time to time, she also dispensed traditional herbal remedies as well, although she never set foot in a hospital or worked as a nurse. Nevertheless, she fitted the bill perfectly for a working-class black alternative to the very middle-class and white Florence Nightingale. So it was that over the years since then, Mary Seacole has come to be accepted as being Florence Nightingale's equal, which is frankly quite mad. The truth is that despite Florence Nightingale's efforts at nursing, far more men died of disease during the Crimean War than were killed in action. After the end of the war, she returned to Britain, and after studying all the dense columns of figures which showed the relative mortality rate by cause and location of death during the war, she realised that nursing and hospitals needed to be revolutionised in the light of these damning figures. The problem was that nobody wished to be told this. It reflected badly on the army, the government, and also upon the medical care provided at the time. Because she had a strong head for figures and was a good mathematician, she had after all been home educated by her father, Nightingale approached Sir William Farr, the foremost statistician of the age, and asked for his advice. He suggested that presenting the figures in pictorial form rather than just rows of numbers might make them easier to understand for ordinary people. Following this hint, Florence Nightingale adapted a method for showing numbers graphically, which was little known at that time, the pie chart. More than that, she modified the pie chart and turned it into what is now known as a polar area diagram, an invention of her own, which is sometimes called the Nightingale rose. An example may be seen in the thumbnail to this video. This way of showing data is easy to understand at a glance because looking at it we know that each section represents a month and the area varies according to the figures. We see immediately that the pink areas, that is to say those deaths from wounds received on the battlefield, are dwarfed by the grey parts which represent deaths from disease. If we follow those sections round clockwise, we can see how the casualty figures and the mortality rates varied from one month to the next. Until Florence Nightingale began to display data in this way, people had to plough through columns and rows in tables, which were not at all easy to make any sense of. With this new method, anybody could see at a glance what was going on. Although Florence Nightingale didn't invent the pie chart, her polar area diagrams helped to make it a popular way of showing figures, and it is thanks to her painstaking work in this field that every child now learns how to understand pie charts. She was elected a Fellow of the London Society of Statistics, an unheard of honour for a woman at that time. It's no exaggeration to say that Florence Nightingale, the study of epidemiology and her influence in the way that medical statistics are studied and interpreted, lasts to this very day. It was her work in the field of mathematics which was her real achievement. It need hardly be said that Mary Seacole, the woman who ran a restaurant for wealthy officers, did nothing of this kind, And yet a false equivalence has now become established in which it is freely asserted that Mary Seacole achieved every bit as much as Florence Nightingale, but has been deprived of the recognition due to her because of the colour of her skin. This is an awful distortion of history.